the flood of July. Oh yeah. Well, anything you say, it's going to be, we'll record it. So be careful and only say nice things, folks. Okay, we got it. Okay. Now this is, we're right across the street from the River DePave, where our house got flooded a little over a year ago, and along with many other houses. And we're coming to you from University City, Missouri, where the politicians never met a bag of cement they didn't like. Okay, so right as we start, I want to show you a 3-slide slideshow that some of our folks got off of the internet.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Okay, so that tells the story very well and very simply. Tonight, we're going to have a program that looks at pavements, floods, climate change, and environmental racism. And we're going to have the flood discussion will be headed by Catherine Rose, talking about what does excess paving have to do with the climate crisis, flooding, and heat islands. Catherine is DePave's communication and engagement coordinator. She works with the Portland Parks and Recreation Department, performing natural area restoration, trail work priorities, engaging volunteers in stewardship programming, and teens in workforce development, and coordinating volunteers for the Mazamas. What are the Mazamas, Catherine?
Yeah, I will just say those were past organizations I worked with. I now work with DePave, but the Mazamas are an old hiking organization that I worked for 2 years ago now. They started in like the late 1800s. They were in the oldest organized hiking groups in the country, and they do cool work. Membership is requisite on having summited a glaciated peak. So folks are in that group, all are avid mountain climbers, and yeah, look them up. They're cool.
Okay. So go right ahead.
All right, let me open my slide here. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. Classic. Let me just start this slideshow from the beginning. I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Good.
Sorry about that. 1 second. All right. My gosh, I was all set up to go and now I'm a little bit of dead air, my bad. All right. Not sure why this is being. Wow. My gosh, sorry. Major technical difficulties.
Joe, do you have a copy you could pull up?
I do, if you'd like me to.
I'm not really sure why it's not letting me get into
There we
full
go.
screen here. Huh. This thing is really.
I think if it's
I see a full screen.
yeah,
You
folks
see
can
it as
read
a
the-
full screen?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we can see the tabs, but it's totally legible. If you want to get going from there, that way the technical difficulties don't get drowned in them. We can
Yeah,
see
I
it.
don't know. Every time I click, it's going into it's changing slides, so. All right, I'm just gonna hope that this works. All right, does that look like full screen to you all?
It looks great.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you for your patience. My name is Catherine Rose. I'm the communications. Why is it? Oh, geez, sorry. This is this Google Suite thing and it's playing for me and it's not letting me.
Is it jumping all around?
Yeah, I don't know why it's
Okay,
doing it.
why don't we let Joe try it and see if that works out, okay?
Yeah, that's why I kind of been hoping. That's why I sent you the PDF, because I just thought it'd be easier. Because for some reason, my bad.
Perfect.
Beautiful. I'm seeing some weird gray space in there, but maybe that's just my computer.
No, we're seeing it too.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, it looked fine, Catherine.
All right, we're moving forward. Sorry about that. All right, thanks for having DePave on here. My name is Catherine Rose. I'm the Communications and Engagement Coordinator with DePave. We're located here in Portland, Oregon. If you want to go to the next slide. I'll just read to you our mission because it really does describe our work quite well. DePave empowers disenfranchised communities to overcome social and environmental injustices and adapt to climate change through urban regreening. DePave transforms overpaved places, creates resilient community, green spaces, promotes workforce development and education, and advocates for policy change to undo manifestations of systemic racism. So throughout this slideshow, hopefully I'll explain some of those terms and why all of this is relevant to depaving. So if you want to go next. I'm going to start by talking about redlining, which is basically the historical racist context for the urban development that is leading to housing segregation and also which has had major implications for urban heat and green space and flooding and all of the issues that come with the history of racist housing development. So redlining comes from a FDR New Deal era act that was the National Housing Act of 1934, which instituted concepts like the 30-year mortgage, low fixed interest rates, and basically techniques to help allegedly with home ownership during the Great Depression. But it also led to the creation of the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which basically helped mortgage lenders determine who to lend loans to, and they created these residential security maps. So you can see here in this map, this is a map of Portland that was created, and the green areas represent best people or businessmen. The blue areas are good people or white collar communities. Yellow is declining area, and that's usually where working class people were located. And then red areas were determined detrimental influences. And those were places where foreign-born, low-class, and Black or brown people lived. And it was made almost impossible by this mapping tool for folks in redlined neighborhoods to buy or refinance. As you might imagine, this has led to generational wealth gaps and other long-term effects and implications for people living in historically redlined neighborhoods. So not only did they affect homeownership, but also higher valued homes, which were able to be taxed at higher rates, were able to fund better school systems, better park systems, transportation, and other infrastructure. Whereas redlined communities where there was lower taxes or lower valued homes, those places basically were more industrial areas or areas that they allowed infrastructural degradation to happen in. And so folks in those neighborhoods often didn't have access to good drinking water. There was lower quality infrastructure, homes with toxic paint. Those were often industrial waste areas and places where factories were, which influence air quality. And also those were areas that ultimately ended up having often more pavement. So if you want to hit next. So you can see how that map that we just saw relates to this map, which is from a New York Times article that shows the urban heat map of Portland. So this is nearly 90 years after the redlining maps were created, and you can still see how those historical maps relate to Portland's heat and just the physical conditions of the city. Over on the west side, you can see Forest Park, which is a massive conserved green space here in the city that was conserved by a lot of wealthier west side homeowners in Portland back in the early 1900s. And then over on the right side in East Portland, you can see areas where there's large dense pockets of extreme urban temperatures, sometimes up to 5 degrees hotter. So, and those areas usually have, like I said, way more pavement and less access to green space. So if you want to hit next. This is a map of our project work. Since DePave was created in 2008, we've done a lot more projects than what are on these maps. And as I'll go into later, we have also created a DePave network as well. So there are other depaving projects that have happened nationally and even internationally that aren't on this map, obviously. But this shows you how we've really focused our project work in that East Portland area where we are seeing the extreme heat due to redlining. And we've also worked in farther out spots in the city, in Gresham and Hillsborough and other places outside of Portland. So we're constantly looking for projects that meet our project goals and the goals of our mission. And I'll talk more about our site selection a little bit if you want to hit next. So actually right now we'll talk about site selection. So here are some of the considerations that and questions that we ask ourselves when we're looking for new project sites. A lot of people ask us, you know, how do we determine who gets to be and where we depave? So we use poverty maps, which is based on census tract data. We are ideally trying to serve BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous people of color. We use that Portland heat map that we just saw to determine places that really justify the most pavement to be removed. Owner, we look at maintenance. That's a big concern, is if the site host is able to maintain their site after we've depaved it, and what kind of resources they would need to be able to continue to maintain the site. We look at demographics. We're obviously hoping to meet our project goals. We like to increase walkability with these sites. We look for other green spaces. So we could create like a habitat corridor, or if there's no green spaces, it's still nice to create a green oasis. We look for flooding issues at the site. If it's a school, we'll ask if it's a Title I school versus like a private school where those places might have more resources to do this work and might not need the DePave's energy as much. We look for a percentage of students on free lunch, and then also whether or not the owner can also provide services if the site owner is able to provide services to our underserved communities. So yeah, if you want to hit next. So I'll go through our two main kind of areas of projects that we work with. Our one project, the maybe more common one, although it depends, I guess, on year to year. We started with a lot of these parking lot retrofits. So this is at an Ethiopian church we depaved in 2013.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, this is a great example. You can see in, is someone's mic on? Okay, nice. You can see in these photos, the building on the left, the site had a parking lot that was actually sloping down towards the building, which was causing a lot of flooding for the basement of that site. And so we depaved some parking. We shifted the parking out. As you can see, we maintained the parking for this building, but we created a berm so the water was not able to flood into the basement. This is a bioswale, so it actually has sculpted lower elevation space in there, so that the water naturally collects down into the soil, and there's a lot of riparian plants in there to help percolate the water and hold moisture there, and so it helps reduce flooding for that site. And if you hit next, This is an example of a transformation project. So here you can tell we depaved this entire parking lot. And if you went back today, you'd see a much greener picture. We should probably get a more updated photo of this project site because the plants are pretty small here. But this was a complete overhaul of this site. We depaved, we added permeable walkways, seating, these wood logs or climbing structures for the children at the Boys and Girls Club. There's a stage, lots of native plantings and a pollinator garden, and along that wall, also a mural. And yeah, so if you want to go next. I'll give us example of our Powell Butte project site. Powell Butte Elementary is a Title I school in the Centennial School District that we depaved in 2019. If you want to go next. So at this school, we'd like to do in a lot of our projects, community outreach into the communities that we are working with. Nothing we do is prescribed or top down. We want to hear from the communities what they want to see at their future site, and we want to have these projects reflect the needs and the cultures of the communities we're working with. So here you can see we did a dot exercise. The green dots signified first pick, the pink dots were second pick, and orange were third pick. So it's a nice visualization of things that the children wanted to see at the school. If you want to go next. So then after we distilled all these project elements, we came up with the top 3 designs for the school site, and then the students actually voted on the design that they wanted to see. If you want to hit next. So this was the parking lot of Powell Butte Elementary. It's a 7,400 square foot parking lot. As you can tell, it's a very lifeless space. There's not much going on there. It wasn't even utilized as a parking lot. So yeah, clearly a space that could use a transformation. And so this was before the DePave, probably the morning of the depaving event. We had the lines cut. You can see it. There's these gridded out lines cut into the pavement. And those are actually cut using a large saw that we rent and have to cut through. Every site is different depending on the thickness of the pavement or the asphalt. So we'll adjust the depth accordingly and then cut out these grids. You go next. On DePave Day, on the morning of the volunteer event, we'll have crew leaders there. Crew leaders support all of the volunteers at our events by helping to train them and do a very hearty safety talk, because safety is really important at these events because we're using pretty heavy equipment and obviously working with heavy pieces of pavement. So we pry up the squares that have been pre-cut. You hit next. So for the build out process of our projects, after we've depaved, we'll have contractors come in and remove. There's usually a subsurface of gravel underneath the pavement that needs to be excavated and removed. And we work basically with volunteers and contractors, and volunteers are really important for creating community ownership. With the Powell Butte site, we had students and families from the school come out to help depave. And in the photo on the left, you can see a planting event that we did with Portland's Parks and Recreation Urban Forestry Division, who helped this last winter. We did a tree planting event with the students, and students got to plant trees and other native plants into the green space. So it's about education and empowerment and engagement, and the volunteers really make the work that we do impactful. You know, we could hire a contractor and they could depave in a day, but that's really not the spirit. It's not in the spirit of the work, right? It's about transformation and engagement. And then on the right is a photo of us working with contractors. Some of this work we couldn't do without them, and we're grateful for having them. So if you hit next.
Is there someone else that's got, they're making a distracting noise? Is everybody off? I'm going to turn myself off here.
Okay, folks, if you have not muted, please mute your computer because we're getting background noise and it's distracting to other people. So please mute if you haven't already done so.
Okay, I can't tell if I still hear it, but all right, so contractors. There's someone's. I think the host can mute everyone. But
The telephone number 131481044106, which is having a telephone conversation.
The host needs to mute everyone because that person is not paying attention to the call, so they don't know that they're being.
That's great. I have to unshare in order to get to this control. Sorry.
Mute.
Hang on.
Mute.
The host was sharing.
Okay, hang on a second, John. There. Okay.
You. I think I got him, maybe.
They're getting background noise. Someone's sound is on. They asked us all to mute. Make sure we are mute.
Frank's on a Zoom call.
Are we mute
and he's
now?
afraid he might be unmuted.
Are we mute?
You are not, whoever's talking.
I don't know.
We are
Okay,
mute. We are mute.
okay, honey, bye-bye.
Mute. We need to.
okay. Nice. It's inevitable with Zoom calls, right?
Don't hit me.
All right, so just to touch briefly on contractors, the photo on the left is a photo of Bencho and his team. Bencho has been working with DePave for a few years now, and his team has done a lot of landscaping work for us, and the Powell Butte project was the first time that we had asked them to do permeable pavers, and they had never installed that type of hardscaping before. And, you know, rather than choosing to find a contractor that had that experience, we took this as an opportunity to give Bencho more time to install the pavers, and it became a workforce development opportunity for Bencho and his team. And now they've done several other permeable paver installations at project sites since then. So we like to apply our mission to all areas of our work, not just in the communities we work with, but also with how and where we hire contractors. We also get pro bono services from different firms. A lot of our landscape designs end up being, not a lot of them, but some of them are pro bono services from landscape design firms in the city. So you can go next. So just to recap, this is what Powell Butte looked like before we depaved. If you want to hit next. So that is the after. It's a pretty incredible difference. You can see the total transformation here at this site. It's green, there's contouring. Obviously, this isn't the same exact view of the parking lot, but if you go there today, they'll see these trees are establishing pretty well. There's a bridge and a large swale throughout that space that collects stormwater when it rains. If you hit next, this site has some musical instruments that are sculptures for the kids to play with. There's climbing logs, play structure, there's a stage. That permeable paver area is kind of used as a Socratic seminar outdoor learning space for the school. And teachers have told us that they'll take the students, if they're having a hard day, just on a walk through the space, and it'll help calm the student down. It's great for their mental health. And it also has allegedly helped to really cool the classrooms on that north end of the site, where before they had been getting baked from the heat coming off of the pavement. And now they said there's a noticeable difference on hot days. And especially in Portland, we are having more and more extreme heat days with climate change. So this work is very immediately applicable to these communities. And This site's also open to the public, so folks from the neighboring areas can come in to just enjoy spending time in this space after the school hours and things like that. So hit next. So I want to talk briefly about our 7th and Sandy project site. This is our first right-of-way project that we've been working on for the past few years. We're still in the outreach phase and we're transitioning into the design phase. So on the left, you can see the current street here. This is located in the inner southeast Portland, in what is called the East Side Industrial Area. This is where a lot of businesses and large factory type businesses exist, and it's considered a freight sanctuary in the city where there's a lot of freight traffic that moves through. However, this part of the city is anticipated to grow by 7,000 households by 2035, and currently there's very little access to green space or park space in this part of the city, and so we want to do something about that. As you can see, the map on the right shows where we would like to DePave and install green space and trees. We're hoping to add a median down Sandy Boulevard, which is the diagonal avenue running northeast to southwest. And yeah, a whole array of stormwater management infrastructure. If you hit next. So that project was a continuation of a stormwater management project that happened up the street that was started by Adam Zucker, who was actually just as a citizen, but also a stormwater engineer. He's applied for a grant and successfully designed and saw through the project and installation of the 9th and Sandy Green Street. So he added a median to this street, which included ponderosa pines, which is a really creative and unique street tree in Portland. You don't see that very often, but they're doing really well and add a nice new tree to the canopy in this part of the city, as well as these 2 triangular bioswale areas that help to collect water on this hill as it's running down this hill that is Sandy runs down, and also provides traffic calming to this area. So if you hit next. So this was a kind of amplification of our public outreach, public input process that we do by being really a public citywide effort. We've been working with a variety of different groups to get input from folks. So our main project partner for this has been Ground Score Association, which is a segment of Trash for Peace. And so they're a worker-owned cooperative group that works with houseless people to run an informal canners depot to help folks who do informal recycling get returnables for their cans at a more efficient way than they're able to in like grocery stores. And they also do camp cleanups and provide other services for the houseless community here in Portland. And we hired some of their workers who are houseless to actually conduct outreach into the community around this project site to hear from folks living on the street what kind of amenities they would like to see in this part of the city. And we also had a bunch of other public outreach opportunities for this, with meeting with designers and cycling advocates and a whole array of folks, business owners in that neighborhood. You can see here, we had 3 different designs. Our preferred design and the publicly preferred design was the cul-de-sac option on the left, which is maximizing the amount of pavement we're removing and prioritizing safety and green space. If you want to hit next. So here's some photos from some of our outreach processes. We celebrated Parking Day, which is a nice global initiative to inhabit parking spaces in September. It's one day in September this year. I think maybe it's always the 15th. But that was fun. We inhabited the parking space and folks stopped by and asked us about what we were doing and just talked to us about our ideas about depaving the street. We also had led bike rides, and I've now coordinated 2 summer events, which have been weekend long block parties where we brought in temporary mobile planters, like big corrugated metal planter boxes that we planted into, working with another local nonprofit called Friends of Trees in Portland, where we invited volunteers to come help us add green space as part of like a tactical urbanism application to this area, where folks got to like really demonstrate the concept of regreening this part of the city. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner photo, it was our first event in 2022. It was held on essentially the hottest day of the year. I think it ended up being like 108 degrees at the heat of the day that our block party was planned. And so we had actually brought in misters and cooling stations. We had free ice cream and free drinks, and it ended up kind of having an unintended but dual purpose of being a cooling center on this really hot day. And that's actually part of the city that there isn't a lot of cooling centers available to folks. And it's so not only were we creating an opportunity for folks to provide input and to our design, but also just it was kind of an emergency preparedness thing too, to provide folks with cooling. And as part of, to riff off of the concept of creative urban design, we also included skateboarding as an element to the project and that event specifically to demonstrate play and alternative uses for a street. And so we had people skating all day, and it was a very great event. If you want to hit next. So like I said, the city's in this part of the city is anticipated to have 7,000 new households coming. And this is playing into a larger citywide vision called the Central City 35 Vision Plan that incorporates other green streets, including the Green Loop, which you can see is that in that map in the top left. That's imagining a loop that's going to be a walking, biking, slow roll, basically loop through the inner city to help connect these communities and create a safe route for folks to just take up space outside on the streets. And our project really naturally ties into that. And I didn't mention this earlier, but this intersection that we've been looking at this project for, part of why we want to do this is that it's a really dangerous intersection. I've personally been like the first responder to a near-death cycling accident. That was really traumatic for me and the cyclist, I think. And I've seen 2 other accidents take place there. It's a really bad traffic pattern. And so we want to use green infrastructure and design to not only manage stormwater, but also create some traffic calming features and safe passage for pedestrians and cyclists and just non-car folks. So if you want to hit next. So this is sort of a great example of what we're doing now. We have, in 2017, we launched the DePave network. And this was really a response to folks reaching out to us, hearing about our work and wanting to apply this to their own communities in different parts of the country. And so you can tell there's these official DePave groups that have started. We have DePave Canada, there's some folks in the Puget Sound, Tennessee, Ohio, the UK. We've been working on our DePave Chicago initiative. This next year, we're going to actually go out to Chicago to DePave with that group and do a training with them. And we've been doing a training to help onboard their group to DePave in their community. But all over the world, last year we had a training with folks in France. So we're always hoping to grow, and we're always looking for folks who want to learn how to do this. We don't want there to be any gatekeeping with the work of DePaving. We believe strongly that this matters, and other people do too. And yeah, we just want to help folks get involved. So if you want to hit next. We also have some resources on our website. We have a free downloadable guide of how to DePave. So anyone can do that. It's a really nice comprehensive guide to help you DePave your driveway, for instance, if you want to just start there. And then there's also a little workshop series on our YouTube channel. If you want to hit next. So this is a newer slide that kind of has to do more with the advocacy part of our work. These are, there's a variety of ways that you can get involved with the movement without actually starting your own DePaving organization. And that starts with code changes, you know, reforming development codes and stormwater management codes to be more lenient to projects like depaving, to changing pedestrian guidelines where sidewalks might be able, green spaces along sidewalks might be able to be increased, medians and roads, reducing and eliminating parking requirements. Big shout out to the Parking Reform Network and linked there, who has been doing this work for a long time, looking at parking mandates and how those have led us to be in the situation we're at, where most places have more parking than what they actually need. And yeah. So yeah, there's a lot you can look into. If you want to reach out for training, consulting, or resources, my email's on there. So is Ted and Katya, our co-directors, and we're always looking for folks to get involved, and we'd love to set up a training with a group like yours if you're interested and organized and wanting to start a depaving initiative in St. Louis. If you want to hit next. Yeah, those are our sources. Maybe hit next one more time. Okay, yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening. I'm here to answer any questions. I know Sean is also, so if folks want to ask any questions, you're welcome to.
Thank you. That was very enlightening for me anyway.
That's fine.
Projects, my God.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's
I never would have believed it could be done. Take up paving? Wow.
it can be.
Do you find there are lots of different soil types or soil situations after you depave?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common one is just that the soil is practically hydrophobic by the point that we've depaved. After it hasn't been exposed to water
Full screen. Can we get more people on?
in the environment in general, the water doesn't absorb, the soil won't absorb water, and so we literally have had to go into sites and drill using like large augers to help aerate the soil and give it life. And it just takes a while for the soil to be able to connect with water again. So compacted, I guess, the main answer I have for you.
Yeah, so
And no addition of organic material, obviously, since it's been paved over.
Totally. And that's why, like, after we've removed the gravel, we'll add additional soil and nutrients to the site, because you couldn't just plant directly into what is left after a depave. Sean, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, in addition to the compaction, we also in Portland, unique geology. So we have a pretty strong clay fragipan layer. So that's actually an impermeable layer of soil, which does need some planning around. Additionally, in East Portland, where most of our projects are, we have a lot of loose aggregates from a historic flood. So if you're thinking about these kinds of projects, you do want to know a bit about the historic geology of your place. So schools are a great place to get that information, usually for free. Geology teachers are always excited to share that information. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to touch on a question in the chat here from Susan regarding the funding source. So DePave's funding is a little multifaceted. It's primarily through government grants through various city and municipal, state, and now federal level funding sources. Just recently, we had received $1 million grant over 7 years from the Inflation Reduction Act. It was done through a coalition of several other environmental nonprofits. I will say that it is important to maintain like positive relationships with your local government to create these type of grant funding opportunities, to know when those opportunities are available for community-based funding. And then also small dollar funding. Most of our donations outside of grants come from individual contributors, usually making small dollar donations. And this work is done, currently we're at our largest funding peak with about $500,000 in operating costs for the year. So it's a pretty lean organization, given the work we're able to put out. But again, it's primarily grant driven and something we're trying to explore other funding alternatives.
Yeah,
So
I love the tiny forest. I've been wanting to start something like that here.
yeah, there was mention of knots. There's a group in France called Mini Big Forest, and they've taken up some DePaving, and they're doing this in a few sites out in France.
You,
I
you
have a question
it
that
kind of
in the chat, in regards to, you mentioned that there will be so many new households coming, and I'm wondering, kind of about the demographics, because oftentimes, when these monies are basically being released, it's in areas, I don't know whether this goes for Portland, and this is exactly my question. They are being done in areas that are slated for gentrification. So I was wondering, in your particular, kind of example, how the demographics will be in relation to the people who still live there and who were involved in your amazing project.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The Central Eastside Industrial District is exactly that. It is an industrial district. It currently has very minimal housing. So these would be new households, typically younger households, kind of your young professional type. Some of our early work did occur in neighborhoods that went through these types of transformations, but that's why the work is intentional with community, right? We recognize that, sometimes these kind of green projects can be at the bleeding edge of gentrification. So we work with communities to build strong anchors in their neighborhoods so that they can still be connected with each other and actually resist some of those changes. Regarding the specific demographics for that area, it's not readily accessible. It's projections from a central city plan.
Hey, Catherine and Sean, I think your presentation was really good. You provided a whole lot of really good information. And at one point, Catherine, you mentioned that the kids in school seem to be more calm and relaxed when they had when the pavement was ripped up and they had green space. And actually, I mentioned this last month in our program. There's good scientific evidence to support that. There's some research which is done that shows that when you give hyperactive kids a walk through a cement area versus a walk through a green space area, that the hyperactive kids calm down, and they so much that they said it was about the same as a dose of Ritalin. And so it really does have a calming effect. And the other bit of research, actually it's been researched more, and that is that patients who are recovering from surgery recover better and do, enjoy a hospital stay to the extent you can enjoy a hospital stay, enjoy it more if their window faces green space than if their window faces a parking lot. So there's very good scientific evidence that cement areas are not calming to the human mind, and the opposite. Now, if I encourage everybody else to make a comment or raise a question, try to, so we don't have people just shouting it out over each other, try to either put your hand up you can have reactions and stick your hand up, or you can put in the chat. I'll probably see you quicker. Is there anybody else who, let's see, was there a comment here who we didn't ask? Okay, Claudia, there you. Oh, you can, in addition to using the electronic hand, you can actually use a human hand.
Sorry.
That's great.
What we have been working on is trying to convince our city council that to set limitations on impervious surfaces in the city. Can you talk a little bit about your interaction with your city government? I'm thinking of those two triangular pieces in the street. Did somebody have to approve that? And how did you get there?
Yeah, I can start, and Catherine, if you want to get into the specifics on 7th and Sandy, take it away. So I work for our local municipal government, the City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. And fortunately, Portland is, I would say, blessed in the sense that we have a very robust stormwater management policy. You can look it up. We do have development guidelines around mitigation when developing after a certain square footage. You have to put in mitigating factors like dry wells, detention ponds, bioswales, permeable pavers. So the code on the private development side it's fairly robust. It's a bit more advanced than it is in other communities in stormwater management. Again, it's for some of the geologic issues we have and how surface water flows in the city. Now, getting there, I couldn't tell you how we got there. It was something I came into. And your comment on the triangle lot, the 7th and Sandy project, certainly that's in the public right of way. We're working with the Bureau of Transportation, with Environmental Services to permit, approve, and fund the maintenance for that site. If there's any other particulars there, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do that 9th and Sandy project, but I'm sure it was working closely with BES, which is our Bureau of Environmental Services, where Sean works. We just started the conversations with BES and PBOT. PBOT is the Portland Bureau of Transportation, for the second design and implementation. Well, actually, the first implementation stage for our 7th and Sandy site. And they, it's just going to be nuanced. They've never done anything like this, and we've never done anything like this. So there's going to be a lot of just figuring out what works. Luckily, we have some strong advocates within the city who really wants to support the project. And, right now the conversation is around maintenance and the dance around who's kind of responsible for the management of the green space once it's created. But so far it seems we haven't actually come up against any permitting that would say that we cannot DePave in the street. So it's actually been an encouraging process. There's just more for us to figure out with how it's going to look.
Yeah,
and I would
some links. Oh, sorry.
I was just say the other kind of just on the topic of permits recently for us, we just came up against some antiquated conditional use permit issues with a project site where we depaved a historical Black church here in Portland that had a parking lot installed in like the 60s that created more parking at that site, and then created, like, it basically led to a parking mandate at that site that didn't exist before. And now we're having to do this conditional use permit to show that this church that has way too much parking can basically live without the amount of parking that's available to it now. And it's costly. I'll share an article. Oh, you just did. Nice. Thanks, Sean. But it just shows how, despite how, progressive Portland is, there are these antiquated laws that affect our work, and it shouldn't be as hard as it is for us to do some of this work sometimes.
Okay. Catherine and Sean, I'll just say that University City, Missouri is sort of unique because it hallucinates that it's one of the most environmentally progressive cities in the state of Missouri. But what it actually does is virtually nothing. We have, after people died in a flood in 2008, they finally, gave approval to tear down some of the homes on Wilson Avenue. And then after the flood 15 months ago in July of 2022, they've done virtually nothing. And even we're trying to get a code passed to make surfaces permeable, so that if you offset things, if you add pavement, you have to offset it. But even that, it's taken like eternity, for the city council to actually do anything. And this one parking lot in University City, someone said it's 11 acres long. It's just absolutely enormous. It's never more than 1% full because they've all gone out of business. It flooded an area in University City, and it's luckily nobody drowned from it. It's amazing. So I'm going to put the Representative Joe Adams and former city manager Frank Ohlendorf on the spot, because we have some elected and appointed representative on the call. And I'm just going to ask, do you think that there's anything that we can do, anything that you've heard tonight that you think that we could be doing wrong or doing better to actually get some action out of University City as opposed for them to see how slow they can possibly go. Joe Adams, are you still on the call? Let's give Joe a minute to unmute. I know that we had you, Joe. Okay, well, listen, if you're still on, Joe, then come back at any time and we'll try to get your response to that. Okay, Frank, I see you. Do you have any thoughts about that? Frank Ollendorf. You got to unmute, Frank.
Can you hear me?
We can hear me. You can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay. There are a lot of things cities can do. We regulate all property uses within the city. And for example, in our ordinances for parking lots, we require that 15% of the area be set aside for landscaping, grass, vegetation, whatever kind of non-paved surface we can get. I wonder if that's common or uncommon. Do others? I go to malls and I see a sea of parking, no trees, no grass, no nothing, just asphalt. So I think his city's pretty good. We require 15% of it to be non-asphalt landscape.
But is that actually enforced? I mean, that large parking lot behind the old Cicero's, I don't see anything set aside.
That's the second thing. The parking lot there that you're referring to, when we built it, late 90s, it was more than 15%. It was tree covered. There was shade all over the place. When they repaved it about 10 years ago, they did away with about half the green space. A lot more asphalt. I complained about that and they said, don't worry about it. We put in permeable asphalt, so we're not increasing the stormwater flow. I'd rather see grass than permeable or any other kind of asphalt, but I wonder what others think about that. Another example of what cities can do, every city, if you build a house, you have a setback requirement, 20 feet from the curb, whatever, 20 feet setback. We have more and more developers coming in saying it's not feasible, they want that reduced to 15 feet or 10 feet. And the city just approved one project to do away with the setback altogether. Now the setback is almost always green. There might be a sidewalk through it, but it's basically green. So the ordinances are not being enforced the way they should. They're being weakened. Probably for very good reasons, for development purposes and so on, but it's detrimental to environmental and stormwater. So those are a few random thoughts.
Well, another thing that I've noticed in University City, not only do they have buildings going up all over the place with more and more cement, with more and more parking lots, but now the new buildings going up are built above grade. In other words, like the new plumbing supply store, which is at Vernon and Kingsland, you can see it's higher, so that when so if it floods again, the water's going to go into University City Children's Center or some other neighboring area. But you can see that all around. The new and the Costco, it's way up there. So their water runs off, and the new filling station that is went in. Where is that? The QT, but that is above grade. So it seems like it's getting worse. It doesn't seem like it's getting better.
That's right, Don, and the Quick Trip is a perfect example. The zoning ordinance requires a 10-foot wide setback, which includes sidewalk and tree planting areas and landscaping. They waived that for the Quick Trip. It's all concrete, nothing else.
Okay, so now I'm going to put Catherine and Sean on the spot.
Okay.
Now, do you know information about how Portland or any other city, is there some way to measure how much new concrete they're pouring down? Because if you take 100 square feet up, but they're laying 200 square feet of concrete down, from the city's propaganda point of view, the city's 100 feet ahead. But from reality's point of view, the city's 100 square feet behind. So is there any data like that you've ever looked at?
That's a great question. Not that I know of. Sean, do you know anything about that?
There isn't a readily available data set that says this is how many square foot of asphalt goes down. There is certainly the public record of building permits issued, which could be analyzed. That information isn't necessarily known at the moment, but it sounds like a project you could take on in your community, certainly.
Well,
because those permits again.
We would certainly need to, because University City's right next is next to Washington University, that thinks it's the greatest university in the Midwest. And so they have to put on an environmental face. And so that's why I'm saying we're in a unique situation in Missouri, is that the city council is always trying to project that it's very progressive. And then what it does is a somewhat of a contradiction. But I'm sure that Portland has totally honest politicians, and that sort of thing never happens in Portland.
I think it's a matter of building actionable relationships with folks in those spaces so that you can really lobby and leverage the existing code to build community benefits. So like the parking set-asides, for example, the 15%, it's common code. The percentages may vary. It may be square footage based. It may be on parking stalls. But, planting a tree in a above grade, planting strip with just grass, Kentucky bluegrass or whatever, like that isn't going to provide much stormwater management. That soil is going to compact readily, easily. It's not going to have a lot of activity in the soil. What could be installed in those locations, and oftentimes you will see this in Portland area parking lots, are depressed bioswale. So there may be curbing, but the curbs have notches in them that slope gently into the planting area. That planting area isn't lawn grass. It has more native ground cover plants. So those plants provide small pollinator habitats. The depression also acts as flood attenuation. The water isn't pooling on top of a flat grade planting strip. It's in a depressed bowl, 6-9 inches typically of ponding. We provide that kind of design guidance to the development community. So that's an example of where you have a building code that says you need to put, if you're going to build, you're going to build a parking lot. In Portland, we don't have a minimum parking requirement. So if you do a new development, you're not required to build, 20 parking spaces or what have you for that business necessarily.
Oh, that's really good. That's one of the things we would like to change in University City. Frank, did you have a comment about that?
Yeah, two other things that cities can and should do. First is to put in the code the open space that you require. Like if you build, you're not going to let somebody build a house and not have any yard. But you let them build a gas station, you let them build anything else. The requirements for open space keep getting cut back. Now we have, and you mentioned Washington University, we had our zoning ordinances required open space for every apartment building. Now the city's policy is to maximize the density, to build more compact. They're building parking lot. They're building apartments on what used to be the backyard. I'm not saying it right. We had an apartment building with, say, 8 units and a parking area and a landscape yard space. The city changed the ordinance, so you don't have to have landscape yard space anymore. You can build on the entire thing. So we have 4 more units. The property values went up. Now we have a apartment building to collect property tax instead of a landscape backyard. Didn't pay any taxes, but it cost us a quarter of the lot is now paved.
Yeah, so
You
that's
have to make choices. You have to make choices. And I guess what I'm saying is cities need to take your subject of less paving, less concrete, and build that into the ordinances somehow. That are alternatives.
Another
Let 'em
alternative.
take-
Oh, sorry for not to cut you off.
And you, instead of building a 3-story apartment building on what used to be the parking lot, why don't you put a 6-story building instead? And instead of putting 2 3-story buildings next to each other, why not have a 6-story building with a parking, with a yard space next to it?
yeah. Well,
In
Frank,
the space of Quick Trip, the open space is at the top of the hill, the landscaping. The open space should be at the bottom of the hill, so it absorbs
Right.
water.
yeah, absolutely. I have what really appears to be a wild hallucination to a lot of folks, and that is that we would build walkable communities where you could actually get by without having a car, or maybe rent a car for special occasions, but where we would have very, very few, if any, parking spaces in residential areas, because you could walk to restaurants, you could walk to a laundromat, you could walk to a hardware store, you could walk to what you need. And so whenever we have these big mega stores like Costco, which they just a few years ago, they drove out 3 blocks of families out of their homes so they could give money to a private developer to get super rich off of it. And every time you do that, that means that people have to, the hope is that people drive from other communities to University City so that University City can get the taxes that Costco pays, so that another community won't get those taxes. But actually that hurts us in 2 ways. It adds to the climate change when they lay down all the concrete. I mean, one of the things about concrete is a simple little formula to remember, that producing 1 ton of concrete releases 1 ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so they create the carbon dioxide when they build these mega shopping centers, and then they create the carbon dioxide when people have to drive in a car instead of take a bus or ride a bicycle or some other way to get there. Okay, any other, Sean, it looks like you're about ready to say something.
Yeah, just jumping in here to say that I'm going to need to jump off the call, unfortunately. But I do want to highlight one thing. We've been talking just in this past few minutes here about city code, building code, development policy. And those are monumental lifts, especially for like volunteer-based community organizing. It requires a lot of coordination, internally in your own group and with folks in government to help, tackle policy review, really look at what alternatives could be proposed. And I think it's a good idea to really find the community partners that own land that are close to you and start experimenting with alternative site uses there. Churches, schools, community centers. That's really how DePave got started. Was we knew folks who had land, or people in school board, PTAs, they came and they were like, hey, what if we did this at our school? The project we ended on, the 7th and Sandy in the public right-of-way, is new territory for us. It is a bit more complicated because you start to get into the esoteric code and what does that actually mean for me trying to deliver a project? And that is harder, and that can be a little demoralizing from an organizing perspective. So again, what's in your sphere of influence? What's closest? City code, it's there, you certainly can influence it. You definitely should influence it, but then in the meantime, what can you do today? And I think really that's how DePave started. It was a grassroots movement. What can we do today to tackle these things that Don's talking about? And certainly there's got to be a church, there's got to be a school building that's, hey, yeah, open-minded to it. And it's a matter of building that community network.
How do we get our camera back?
And I would say too, is like key to working with those groups is to really, ask them what they want to see and have it be driven by the community. Because if the space you're creating is something that's reflecting what that community wants, they're more likely to care for it and keep the maintenance going. So, yeah, there's a lot, it's a whole process to DePave, and it's a long journey. But if you're interested in working with us and starting a depaving movement and you want to be trained through our training system, we'd love for you to reach out to us and we could offer you a training. And that's something that probably be best to email Ted or Katya about to initiate. But I also have to hop off here, but I really appreciate you all giving us some time to talk about DePave. And if you want to sign up for an e-news, there's a sign up link on our website to sign up for our e-newsletter, and then you can stay in the loop with projects we're doing and updates.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Catherine and Sean, we really appreciate your participation. If there's any other thoughts, we may not have time for a reaction from Sean and Catherine, but we could certainly, if you want to make a comment, go right ahead.
Great presentation.
Yeah,
Eye-opening.
wonderful.
So
And your
much.
material is fantastic. I had a chance to read through it before the meeting. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Thank you.
Okay, and so I will say, I'm not sure that we're going to have another discussion group until January, the beginning of 2024. I haven't really talked to other people who work on coordinating this, but we'll run into the holidays, both the Thanksgiving holiday and the Christmas Hanukkah holiday. So we need to be careful. We're not sure, what we're going to do. And if you've been on the call at the beginning of the call, I'm sure you heard Big Yellow Taxi. And so and if you might have heard it last time, but if you really didn't hear the song at the beginning, stick on for a few minutes. And Lou Panopoulos, you might give me a call afterwards. We should talk. So Joe, okay, Joe's going to stop recording so that we can actually send this recording around. But Joe, you want to hit Big Yellow Taxi again now after you unrecord?